Welcome to the Pan Am Football Mock Draft Hub. All 2021 mock draft coverage can be found right here, including weekly mock drafts, prospect evaluations, and general draft and team building topics. Alright, welcome back to Pan Am Football. I'm Max Dean, and today we are going to be doing our 2021 NFL mock draft version 1.5. So, real quick, just a couple of things. If you haven't seen my mock drafts before, first of all, throw a like my way. It really helps out a lot. I am a tired dad who is just trying to do this stuff whenever I can. So if you appreciate it, it's a very easy way to say thank you. And if you do like what you see, you can subscribe. We will be doing all kinds of mock drafts as the season progresses, and of course in the off season we'll be doing free agency previews. We'll be talking about coaching and GM turnover and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of draft content in particular. So just keep that in mind. And of course, for now, during the regular season, this is going to be the format that we continue with. We're going to be doing no trades. We're just going to use the draftnetwork.com's mock draft simulator here. We're going to use their draft order. And we'll be looking at trades and things like that once we have a better idea of who's going to be in charge of each team, especially here at the top of the list. We don't know which coaches are going to be in. We don't know which GMs are going to be in. So it's going to give us a lot of insight as far as their tendencies and what's more likely to happen. So as of right now, no trades. Version 1.5 is going to take into account all of the Week 14 games that have occurred. So this one should come out not too terribly long before the Thursday night football game for Week 15. So let's get it started. Real quick, the New York Jets select first overall. Nothing's changed. They're going to take Trevor Lawrence. We'll talk more about some of the what if Lawrence holds out and pulls a power play and moves this? It's not going to happen. I'll do probably a video on why it's not going to happen, but it's not going to happen. As of right now, the Jaguars are still half game up on the Jets, meaning they have the second overall pick. They will still be taking Justin Fields here. We'll play around, like I said, with trades in the future, which may end up resulting in some other quarterback choices. Probably not. I mean, this is definitely the most likely 1 and 2 overall. Even as far out as it is right now. The Bengals are picking third. We've talked about this in other mock drafts, so I won't spend too much time on it. But they drafted their franchise quarterback first overall last year, and they really need to protect him. He was getting pounded before the injury. It's not just because of the injury. It's not just a snap reaction to that. He was getting shredded by defensive lines and blitzes. They need offensive linemen. It has to be the number one priority. Picking third overall means Penei Sewell is right here available. He did opt out this year, but he is, at least up through last year, a tremendous prospect. So he's going to be going to the Cincinnati Bengals there. They can reshuffle their offensive line a little bit to fit him in there, most likely at left tackle. Number 4 overall, the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone's got an opinion on the Cowboys. The Cowboys, they are the most popular team in the NFL, or very close to. They get tons of media coverage. Everybody's got an opinion on them. So we're going to talk quickly, probably a little bit more about them. For that reason also, because here at number 4 is where the picks maybe are slightly less obvious. Okay, first of all, Micah Parsons doesn't make any sense to them. I've said before, they just drafted Leighton Vander Esch in the first round a couple of years ago. You can draft strength on strength because Vander Esch has been up and down a little bit, but if you need to rebuild a team that's this bad, you can't just keep drafting linebackers in the first round. It doesn't make sense. It's not a premier position. As good as he is, they have much more pressing needs at more premier positions. Jamar Chase, they just drafted CeeDee Lamb last year. They just paid Amari Cooper a lot of money last year. We can look at some of his finances and maybe there are ways that they can move on from him. But again, you've seen that they need other positions. So, and I can't remember if Michael Gallup is a free agent. I don't think he is because I've been paying attention. Maybe he is. I need to double check on that. But regardless, it's just not the logical choice for them here. So that comes down to basically these four guys: Gregory Rousseau and Kwity Paye, the edge players from Miami and Michigan respectively, and Patrick Surtain II and Caleb Farley, the cornerbacks from Alabama and Virginia Tech respectively. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about each of these guys and what they bring to the table. So Gregory Rousseau, I think I'm speaking a little bit too quickly here. I'm trying to get things done. Trying to not make this video too long, but Gregory Rousseau is a big edge player who he's at the top of this list because of his physical tools and what he did last year. Now, a lot of what he did last year was hype for what he was going to grow into this year, if that makes sense. So he had a lot of talent, and it would have been nice to see him develop more technically this year. And so people were kind of projecting him to be in this top 5, top 10 place. Now, he opted out, and so no one's gotten to see that. He's also a little bit of a edge/interior tweener, so he rushes from both of those places. He's not really going to be a space player. He's not really going to fit as like a rush outside linebacker at all. Now, Kwity Paye has been very productive this year. He's also a physical freak. He does translate primarily as a base end, although he's not quite as much of a tweener as Gregory Rousseau. Like, you could rush him inside a little bit, but just not super consistently. So between those two guys, production-wise, Kwity Paye is who I would prefer. Gregory Rousseau, not only is he less technically proficient than Kwity Paye based on what we've seen most recently, he also hasn't played football in a year. So if we're looking at who to draft in the top 4 out of these two guys, I would take Paye, because you just kind of know what you're getting. You're getting a more pro-ready guy. Gregory Rousseau might be the better player overall, but I doubt a team would take him in the top 4. It's just my guess right now, especially if Kwity Paye is on the table. Now, if we're looking at cornerbacks, Patrick Surtain is the slightly less athletic player. He also has played this year, and he's very, very good in man coverage. He's got good hands, great mirroring technique. Caleb Farley opted out this year, but he is extremely physically gifted, certainly the most physically gifted corner that is also in the top rated technically players, because you're always going to find just like outrageously talented athletes who just won't even be taken in the top couple of rounds just because they haven't shown enough in terms of their technique. So he has that going for him. It depends on what you want out of a cornerback. So that's what. That way I won't have to go through these guys again in the next few picks. However, what's best for the Cowboys? The Cowboys have DeMarcus Lawrence and they have Aldon Smith as edge players. Aldon Smith has been good compared to expectation. Now, compared to expectation, he's over 30 and coming off of a long-term suspension, and he was out of the league. He ended up being reinstated. He came in and he's played. That is not what you build your franchise around, okay? He's a nice accessory piece. It doesn't mean you don't take a guy like one of these two here. Then on the other side, you've got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's been very good at his best, but also kind of not really been noticeable when he's not at his best. Okay, so when you're paying a guy in that near $20 million a year, you need him to show up week in and week out. Like, he's not like he's going to be the best in the league, because there's obviously always only one of those guys, one or two, but he's got to show up. That being said, if you really want to build a team, you need to look for a guy who's going to be that presence for the next however many years. If you keep Alden Smith and DeMarcus Lawrence because they work out and they end up being worth the money, great, but you can't rely on them. On the back end, cornerback is a need for them, but it's not as important of a position. So when you're picking in the top 4 and you have an option to go for guys like this, I personally think that you should prioritize edge. A tremendous pass rush will always make coverage easier for you. It will always make life easier for your defensive backs. No matter how good your defensive backs are, if your guys aren't getting pressure, eventually the ball will get out. Someone will get open. Now, there have been teams who have kind of done the back end forward, but the Cowboys are not structured like that. That's not, if you go for Patrick Surtain, I don't think that the rest of their team is structured so that you're playing this dominant coverage and then linebackers are going to get there. That's not really how they're built. So I'm going to look for an edge player first. You can look for a solid cornerback in the second, just like they did last year. You might not have the best secondary in the league, but again, it's just not as important as the pass rush. So we're going to take Kwity Paye here. Hope that makes sense to everybody. And feel free to comment and tell me, if you disagree, why. We've already had some good interaction, which is excellent. Okay, so moving on. We are going to take a look at the Chargers here at pick number 5 overall. The Chargers need offensive line help. Last year, offensive line was a priority for me, for them. Justin Herbert ended up being a tremendous pick, especially the fact that they didn't have to trade up to get him. That worked out excellently. Now, with that second first-round pick, which was actually a trade up from the second, they really should have been looking for an offensive lineman there, I think. I can't remember exactly who was available. Austin Jackson might have already been gone, but you should have been targeting a player like that, not a player like Kenneth Murray. Yes, Kenneth Murray he's a fine player, but you're neglecting the most important positions. Going into this year, they should have been so much better than they are right now. They have a tremendous pass rush. They've got Jerry Tillery, Melvin Ingram, and then Joey Bosa as your 3 primary pass rushers, who are all very good and can do different things. So that being said, you have this great quarterback. You have these offensive weapons in Hunter Henry and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And so you've got an offense, you've got a pass rush. Why are you so bad? Well, aside from some coaching issues, it's the offensive line. They're getting no push in the run game, so teams are able to play, basically one aspect of their defense more so than the other. And also, they're able to rush the passer. And so, as good as Justin Herbert plays, he's always... He has to play in the face of a pass rush. You're never giving him really the opportunity to dominate versus kind of reacting. They're not dictating how the offense performs. And so he's been so good, but he would be even better if you protected him properly. Now, that being said, where here do we really have an offensive lineman who's worth the 5th overall pick? As we go forward, this is probably going to be a trade back situation because there are a couple of quarterbacks still on the table and quarterback needy teams who are picking in the next few picks. If you look up top, Panthers could be one, Falcons could be one, Eagles could be one. Giants could be one. And there's quite a few teams right around this area who could well jump up to pick number 5. But without making a trade here, let's look at who's going to be the most impactful player who they can select in the top 10. I think cornerback is their most pressing need outside of offensive line. So with the pass rush that they have, I'm going to look at Patrick Surtain. I like the technical refinement. I like Caleb Farr, but I prioritize the technician because he's just less likely to make mistakes. He may never have the ceiling of Caleb Farley, but he'll probably make less mistakes over his career. So, with a good pass rush, I'm fine with that. Probably create turnovers, have a lot of batted balls, etc. Now we have the Carolina Panthers at pick number 6. So, like I said, we've been getting some good responses. I like it. So, I believe there was one person who said that in response to me saying that they don't really need a linebacker that much, that Shaq Thompson is overrated, and I believe, if I'm not misquoting, he said Shaq Thompson is overrated, and that Jeremy Chin is too small to consistently play linebacker. And that's true. That both of those things are true. At the same time, it's not a priority position to me. If you have guys that you can get by with, then I'm fine with that. Because choosing a linebacker in the first round, especially a linebacker in the top 10, that's what I call luxury picks. Those are picks that you make when you look around your roster and you're like, yeah, we're pretty well set, and we don't have major need at premium positions like pass rusher and cornerback and offensive line and quarterback and things like that. So you were right, but I just don't think that it's what they need to be looking at right here. They did draft a couple of pass rushers early over the past couple of years. I know Brian Burns wasn't a pick of the new regime, I think. So he's played well, though, and he's still pretty young. So I wouldn't say that means that they'd go edge rusher. They took Yetur Gross-Matos early in the second round just this past year. So they're pretty good there. But you always need to consider players like that when you're in this top few picks. They do need cornerback help. That would help out their defense a lot, especially depending on how the rest of the offseason goes for some of these teams. In the NFC South, you have a lot of very good receivers. So, you've got super physical athletes like Julio Jones. You've also got their second guy who they just took in the first round a couple of years ago, and now his name is escaping me, but he was another Alabama receiver in Atlanta. Then you also have Mike Evans and maybe Chris Godwin if he sticks around. Mike Evans being the more physical player. Then, in New Orleans, you also have... Man, I'm bad with names today. I'm sure everyone and their mother knows exactly which wide receiver I'm talking about. In New Orleans, Mike Thomas. And so it would be good to have a guy who can match up against those players now that you've got a bit of a pass rush. Now, you'd also be looking at quarterback because you have Teddy Bridgewater, who is under contract for, I believe, 1 more year. That's something I want to double check. But you want upside from your quarterback position. You kind of don't want to be... Let's see here. So he's under contract for 2 more years. And he hasn't been bad, but you want upside from that position, so you also need to consider that. From these other players that you have here at the top of the draft board, I mean, tight end is just, again, similar to linebacker. It's not a premier position, so if you have other needs, you kind of put that on a back burner. So as far as Kyle Pitts is concerned, I wouldn't really be considering him. Wide receiver, and they have a Curtis Samuel, who is a free agent this year. They could retain him if they want to. They have Robbie Anderson for 1 more year. And then they also have DJ Moore, who I believe has 1 more year, and then you could put the 5th-year option on him. So I think he's a 3rd-year player this year. So, it's not a pressing need. If you already have DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, even if you don't keep Curtis Samuel, you can draft a guy later. You can look for a guy from free agency. So it's just not a big need. Christian McCaffrey also, when healthy, does rack up receptions. So I'm just not sure that that's where you'd want to look either. I think most people probably agree with that. And they could use some offensive line help as well. They traded for Russell Okung, who's older and going to be a free agent. So the guys that I would be targeting here for the Carolina Panthers would be Caleb Farley at the cornerback position, Zach Wilson or Trey Lance at the quarterback position, and Samuel Cosme from the offensive tackle position. So if these quarterbacks are still available, both right here, I think that I would prioritize that. You don't have to start either of them right away, which is always nice. It's a good quarterback draft class. You don't know what next year's draft class will be like. So, a lot of people say, well, you got Teddy Bridgewater for 2 more years, right? So build up the team around him and then draft a guy next year. Well, here's the thing. What if next year the Panthers go 9-7 and miss the playoffs? So they're picking in no man's land as far as quarterbacks are concerned. You're looking at, the it's like 17th overall pick or something like that. So you have to trade your whole freaking draft class just to get up there, or future picks if you want to try and get a guy. Or what if they pick high? What if they have a rough year with Teddy Bridgewater? They pick high, but there just aren't good quarterback options available. Even if you're looking at this future group, they might regress. If they don't pick first overall, maybe the best guy goes, and then the next best guy got hurt late in the season, and you just don't know what you're going to get from him. So in this situation, what I would look at is the most important position that you have on a football field, and you say, we're in position to take this player. We might not be in position again, and you go for it. It's always better to have too many quarterbacks than too few. So we're going to take Zach Wilson, quarterback from BYU here. 7th overall, we're going to speed it up a little bit here. We have the Atlanta Falcons. So this is a position where you certainly could go quarterback, but we don't know what the new GM and what the new coach are going to be looking for as far as their roster is concerned. Because they can't move on from Matt Ryan this year, I mean, not really. They probably kind of have to suck it up and say, let's just go for the best available player at a position of need. And then next year we'll kind of reassess where we are. If we want to trade Matt Ryan, then maybe we can get a fair amount of stuff for him and then look to rebuild our team from there. But most likely you're going to be playing with Julio Jones. You're going to be playing with Matt Ryan. Calvin Ridley was the other wide receiver I was trying to think of earlier. And and go from there. So they are just desperate for an edge player. They don't have a good cap situation. They can't go out and sign one. Dante Fowler Jr. hasn't been that good. They already owe him money. So they've got to address this position in the only place that they can afford to do it, which is high in the NFL draft. So we're going to take a flyer here on Gregory Rousseau, the edge player from Miami. This might be a trade back situation for them also. Like, theoretically, if this is how it fell, you might be talking to the Giants about jumping up a couple picks to grab Trey Lance or something like that. But so as of right now, no trades. We're going to draft Gregory Rousseau. The Dolphins, again, I've been saying how much I love this pick to them because they're the only team picking in the top 8 who have that luxury option. One of the reasons for that is because it's not actually their pick. They're much better than this pick. They got this pick from the Texans, so they're possibly playoff bound, and because of their scheme, a really excellent linebacker would make a big difference for them. They also have lots of players at other positions. They've got a pretty solid defensive line. They invested heavily in the offensive line. They have other picks to draft other positions of need, like adding receivers and so on and so forth. So we're going to take Micah Parsons here, not look back and celebrate all the way until we get the pick for them again. Philadelphia Eagles. This is also a weird one. They might be looking for a quarterback too. I know they just took Jalen Hurts last year. I know every Philly fan is like, did you see what he did? He just won a game. Just breathe for a second. There are 3 games left. Basically they played a team who had no tape on that player at all. And so as we go down the stretch, it might not be how it goes from now on. I'm not saying that he won't be really good. I mean, I liked him as a prospect. It's just let's not count our chickens before they hatch, right? If we're Philadelphia. Now, I'm not going to pick a quarterback here, but I would definitely say that it could very well be in the market for drafting one, especially because if they lose a couple more games down the stretch, they might even be picking higher than 9. Now, aside from that, their biggest need would be linebacker, but Micah Parsons is gone. Not that I think they would make that pick anyway. Safety, kind of like linebacker, but not quite as much. It's a bit more of a luxury position. They could definitely use a cornerback. However, I think wide receiver is a more pressing need. With Caleb Farley still here, I am definitely tempted to go that route. But you know what? And the truth is, actually, that is, as tempting as this is, they did just draft a wide receiver in the first round last year. And it's generally not very good business to draft the same position in the first round back-to-back years. For a few reasons. One, those players need to get paid around the same time. So we're going to go with Caleb Farley here. You have a less expensive, high upside player to pair with your expensive Darius Slay. And that's not what I meant to do. And then, if you want to move on from Darius Slay when Caleb Farley gets paid, then that works. It's also a premier position at a position of need. So I know that people would be screaming for Jamar Chase, but you just drafted Jalen Reagor last year. You just drafted him in the first round. Look for a wide receiver who's at the top of the second if you want to. It's a good wide receiver class again. So that leaves me right here where I actually would go with Jamar Chase. Now, here's the other thing. Actually, okay, I've flip-flopped a little bit on this, and my opinion has always been pretty clear. I do not like Daniel Jones as the quarterback there. If Dave Gettleman gets fired, I can almost guarantee you that they're going to look for a new quarterback. If he stays, probably not. If they miss the playoffs, Dave Gettleman is probably gone. If they make the playoffs, maybe he stays. I don't know. This is why this is so hard at this point in the season. Because, like, my guess... Okay, so what I would do is definitely move on from Dave Gettleman. I know people may have varying opinions on that, but I would. I think he's done okay in some aspects, but he's just made mind-boggling decisions in too many different situations. He's prioritized non-premier positions, and etc. So, because I think they should move on, I'm going to draft Trey Lance for them here. All right. The Lions at pick 11. Already at 30 minutes. Good Lord. Okay. The Lions here, they are going to go with Jamar Chase. Kenny Golladay is a free agent. They may get a deal done with him. They may franchise tag him. But they need help on the offensive side of the ball there. They do need a defensive line help, especially interior. Really, really across the defensive line, I think. But it's just there isn't a player that we're going to be taking in the top 11. And so Jamar Chase available. We're going to draft him. He opted out, but he is a tremendous prospect. I think pick 11 is a very reasonable place to take that swing. San Francisco 49ers, they drafted a wide receiver in the second round, then a wide receiver in the first round. And even though Jalen Waddle is exactly their type of guy, he's just not a need for them. We could go with Samuel Cosmi. As of right now, I just don't know exactly what they're going to do with their tackle position. They traded for Trent Williams last year, but he is scheduled to be a free agent, so they need to get something worked out for him. If they don't, I'm not sure exactly what their plan is, but they could be in the market for a tackle in the draft. Fred Warner needs to get paid as well, and he is probably the most important part of their defense aside from some of those defensive linemen. So take that into account. They could look at cornerback. That's kind of been my consistent look for them because they have all those guys they need to pay on the offensive line / linebacker. And without a quarterback here to really consider, then we're going to be looking for J.C. Horn here from South Carolina. They have a couple of guys who are scheduled to be free agents, if not nearly all of them. So we're gonna look there. I'm pretty sure Emmanuel Mosley is a free agent. I'm pretty sure that Jason Verrett is a free agent, and I can't remember exactly what the situation is for Richard Sherman. But, he's been hurt. He's a little bit older now, so he might even be a free agent. I honestly can't remember. All right, next up, 13, we have the Denver Broncos. They should be looking to trade up for a quarterback. Absolutely. Without one available, edge is a position that they might need. But then what do you do? Are you going to trade Von Miller? I guess you could trade Von Miller. If they traded Von Miller, Joseph Ossai is a great fit for them. He would fit really well into that outside linebacker role, or outside linebacker rush position. Corner, they could look for as well. Wide receiver, they're pretty well stacked at the moment. Tight end, they don't really need. They just extended Garrett Bowles. So it's really edge, quarterback, or cornerback. Quarterback is the biggest need, but who's here? Nobody. Corner would probably round out your team better, but I guess if you really feel like Von Miller is done, then you can trade him and take Joseph Ossai here. I'm not sure if that's what I would do, but it's just going to depend on the medical stuff for Von Miller, how he's looking in the offseason. I know he's very expensive, but still not sure I would do it. The Vikings here. This is a pick we've been making regularly. Wyatt Davis is an excellent fit here. He adds to what you already have. You have a good run game. This will make it an even better run game. Your best player is, aside from maybe Justin Jefferson, is Dalvin Cook. This makes Dalvin Cook better. Will allow you to run play action even more. This is exactly the kind of pick that helps your team in more ways than just filling a hole, so to speak. All right, the New England Patriots at pick 15. This is a weird one. If Jalen Waddle's been here, I've been looking at him just because he is the kind of player that Belichick could really do a lot with, and I think they need more speed on that team offensively. I think that Jalen Waddle could really do a lot of damage, and everyone knows Belichick likes his Alabama players. They did take a wide receiver in the first round 2 years ago. I don't know that this would really stop them because he hasn't been that good. You know, they could reload on defense as well. But, I mean, what are we looking at? I mean, they always pick a guy you're not expecting anyway. So, but where's the defensive player that you think is going to be that guy? I mean, Eric Stokes. I guess they could go. They might do that. They could go that route. Or they could add to the offensive line again, but it's hard to say. They're a little bit in no man's land. You also don't know exactly how the end of their season is going to play out. I know they'll be in the market for a quarterback, but they have money. They could trade for one. They could find one in free agency. We'll see. The Chicago Bears. They may also be looking for a quarterback, but I don't know what their situation is going to be like. As far as the front office and coaching staff, I think that both of those guys should probably go. Ryan Pace and Nagy. I think just get a fresh start. It's the best situation, I think. But without a quarterback available, we're going to go for a tackle here. Samuel Cosme from Texas still available. That's where we're going. The Las Vegas Raiders. No pass rush. They've got a hell of a tight end. They've got wide receivers. They just drafted one in the first round last year. They have a good offensive line, but they could get younger there. This just keeps being my pick for them because this is where Jay Tufele could go without being too much of a reach. So we're going to stick with that. They got pushed around in the run game way too much. So Jay Tufele from USC is going to the Raiders. Now we have the Baltimore Ravens. I guess this would be the last team not to make the playoffs. All right, so Ravens, they do need edge. They could go with wide receiver. They've got their speed wide receiver, who they took a couple years ago. They could go, just in 2019, they could go with a slightly bigger bodied guy. It certainly wouldn't hurt. He might be more efficient in the run game. They could add to that offensive line, both interior and on the outside. If you go tackle, it could kind of have a little bit of a cushion in case Ronnie Stanley needs more time to come back from injury next year. And then you can slide him over to the right side and let your current right tackle go off in free agency or trade him. Because who else here? They just went linebacker last year. They've got cornerback locked down. For guard, who's really worth it? I mean, they just went running back in the first round, in the second round last year. So this is really down to two players for me at this point. You could go Christian Darrisaw, or you could go Rashad Bateman. I think those are the two players that would be in consideration if the board fell this way. I'm torn really because if you this protects you from the Ronnie Stanley injury, and it lets him come back when he's ready to come back. Then once that's the case, you can have Darisaw at right tackle and let Orlando Brown move on either in free agency and get a comp pick and have really nice depth, or you could trade him if you wanted to and maybe get a little bit more but not have that injury protection. I really like Rashad Bateman to them also, but I think this is the route we're going to go. Christian Darisaw, we're going to take the tackle, and if he doesn't need to start right away, then that's fine. You can have a dominant run game with one of the best swing tackles in the league, probably. Run heavy a lot. That would be an interesting scenario. The Washington football team, obviously they need a quarterback, but that's not happening here. They do need a tackle. They could use a wide receiver, but that is certainly a second round option if they want to go to. So we're going to take Rashawn Slater here, the tackle from Northwestern. They need a left tackle just desperately, really, really badly. Since the whole Trent Williams thing happened when he sat out last year. And I know it's obviously a new coaching staff, but that team has still needed ones for over a year now, for like 2 years straight. The Arizona Cardinals at 20. Let's go for... This might be a nice place to go for a guard. They do really need help there. Defensively, they could go for a cornerback as well. I feel like they can make things work with cornerback. They might be able to get Pat Pete back on a lesser deal or look for a guy that way. I think interior offensive line is definitely a need for them. Their guard play has not been very good. I'm not really sure what they want to do, though. I mean, they have Kelvin Beachum, who's probably a free agent this year. I think he only signed a 1-year contract at right tackle. They've got their left tackle, who they just signed to an extension this past year. And then they drafted Jones, I think his name is, from Houston in, I think, the 3rd round last year. So he's probably going to slide into that right tackle spot. So let's go for interior offensive line. This could help get pressure out of Kyler Murray's face and not have so many batted balls there. Dolphins here. I think Rashad Bateman is a nice choice. They could go running back as well, but I just don't think it's as big of a need. As good as Travis Etienne is, you can get a good running back in the 2nd round, and you have multiple picks in the 2nd round, or you could even go 3rd round. And they've got Devontae Smith there, who already has a really nice rapport from the Alabama days with Tua Tagovailoa. So Devontae Smith there, smaller receiver, very fast, very good. I think he'll be a nice fit alongside Devontae Parker. They'll accent each other nicely. Then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 22. This is a very weird team to pick for, just because they have so much influx there. They have a lot of veteran players, a lot of expensive players. They're going to have to let some guys go. I've done different picks for them at different times, because it also just depends. I mean, Brady is under contract, but what if he retires and stuff like that? Who the hell knows with these guys? They are one of the hardest teams to pick for. They could use a pass-catching running back. I've said that a lot. They could go wide receiver if they do decide to let, Chris Godwin walk in free agency. They could use a wide receiver. Or if they sign Godwin and decide to trade Mike Evans, then they could also go for a wide receiver. It totally depends on what they do. But so let's say that they don't want to spend 16, 17 million dollars on two different receivers. So one guy goes, not sure which one. Let's go for Rashad Bateman here out of Minnesota. The Colts will be in the market for a quarterback. These guys, they may well look for a trade partner and pick up one. They might go for Sam Darnold, or they might go for Matt Stafford. Might be an option for them. They would cost different amounts. Obviously, Matt Stafford would cost a lot more. Darnold would be a bit of a reclamation project, but you'd get him for much less, and if you believe you could turn him around, that would be a savvy move, but you got to believe that you can do it. Let's go tackle for them. I think that's been a regular position that we've looked at. We're going to go Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame, because even if you have Costanzo back for one more year, this kind of protects you from what if he's like, yeah, I'll come back for one more year, and then it's a long training camp, and he's like, you know what? I mean, I would be nervous after being burned by Andrew Luck. Just like find yourself a backup situation, like a backup plan. Okay, then the Cleveland Browns. Let's go with I think I've done this before, but we're going to go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. A bit of a luxury pick, but I think it fits their style well. They'll probably pick up the fifth year option for Mayfield at this point. Have a dominant running game. Donovan Peoples-Jones has stepped up. They've got a lot of pieces there. So if you build yourself a dominant defense and a really good run game, and then kind of move forward with Mayfield and see what you do without just dropping a big extension, this is a great guy to come in and fit there. They could go Eric Stokes as well. Like, that would be the other option, but I think that's a good move for them. All right, New York Jets selecting their second player in the first round here at 25. Let's see. These needs are all pretty accurate, but I wouldn't be looking at linebacker in the first round or running back or tight end. And they don't have interior offensive line listed as a need, which I would say it is, but they might address that in free agency. They certainly have some money to spend. Some of these guys are farther down the board now than they previously have been. They could go Zaven Collins. That's a guy who's an interesting player. It depends on what the Jets' scheme is coming up this next year when the new coaching staff is hired. I probably wouldn't change it around too much, but man, they just need so much. I'm just looking for a player who pops out like, this is a really good player, and they'll be glad they have him, even if he's not the biggest need. But I'm not doing it for a tight end or a running back. I might go with Eric Stokes here from Georgia. They need defensive help so badly, and while rusher is... Actually, let's go with the rusher. We're going rusher. We're going rusher for the Jets. It's just the most important thing. It really is. And they just don't have one. They haven't had one in forever. So, and he's just going to make Quinnen Williams even better. He's going to make everybody better. Do they need a corner? Hell yes, they need a cornerback. But we're not going to go that route right now. Tackle, get me the best tackle and just run away. Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan for the Jaguars at 26. Tennessee Titans, they also need a pass rusher badly. Could kind of use everything on defense, really. Yeah, they could kind of use everything on defense. Offensively, they don't need a ton of help. Their offense probably won't change much next year. You know, if they want to re-sign Corey Davis, they can. They can find somebody else in free agency who's probably like equitable in terms of production. Don't see a rusher here that I want to reach for that much. Might be a trade back scenario for them, maybe. Or maybe they do want to reach a little bit. You could go with Ojulari. He's 240, 6'3". I feel like that's just a little bit of a projection for them. But you know what? I mean, it's their biggest need. It's super important. Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia. Just, you can't just push that off. I mean, just everything they've done at that position has not worked out. You can't ignore it. So they're going to go back with this pick here in the first round. I'm going to try and do this in less than an hour. Good Lord. The Buffalo Bills here at pick 28. Eric Stokes is sitting there waiting for him. Green Bay Packers at pick 29. Interesting. They could go with a guy who could develop a little bit. I mean, at this point, you're almost to the second round anyway. I mean, does Kyle Pitts fall out of the first round? Probably not. Does Travis Etienne fall out of the first round? Probably not, but maybe. Yeah, so we're gonna go Kyle Pitts here. I mean, no, we're not. I mean, Aaron Rodgers just makes it work with everybody. Like, what is the point of drafting a tight end in the first round for them? It doesn't make any sense. Just trying to force him in there, I guess. It doesn't make any sense. Let's go Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU. He's been having a great year, super productive. The whole Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love thing we'll have to touch on another time. I'm running out of time. Pittsburgh Steelers. They need to replace Bud Dupree, maybe, because now that he's hurt, they might bring him back at a reduced 1-year deal. Because they do have salary cap issues, but if he's willing to go low and kind of rejuvenate his market by sticking with the Steelers for another year, they may have him back. It's been said they are going to let Alejandro Villanueva go, and it's been said that they're going to let Juju Smith-Schuster go. Tackle would be obviously more pressing because they have other players at wide receiver position. So if they really do let him go, I guess Alex Leatherwood is probably the player to fill Villanueva's role. The Saints will go with Kyle Pitts here. Because they're going to have to restructure like everybody on their team basically to be salary cap compliant, and then cut a bunch of guys too. So they need offensive weapons that are relatively inexpensive. Jared Cook will certainly go. The Saints are another team that may be in the market for a quarterback as well. Taysom Hill may still be on the team, but they might want a future guy. This is a team that might trade for Sam Darnold because they wouldn't be able to afford any other quarterback in a trade. Like, they wouldn't be able to afford Matthew Stafford or anybody like that. He might be their only option as a guy to bring in with as that much upside. And then finally, pick 32, the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a couple of guys leaving in free agency at the wide receiver position. But you're building strength on strength if you do go for a wide receiver, which is what they've been so successful at doing this year. But another year in, let's let Patrick Mahomes raise everybody else up a little bit. Go for a wide receiver in the second round. I mean, they may trade back here anyway. Let's go Trey Smith, boost the run game, and then get a wide receiver in the second round. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching. If you made it through this whole thing, it was long this week. Sorry. These are the picks. Let me know in the comments who you're a fan of, if you like the pick, and if you didn't like the pick, why? Who would you pick instead? I am loving the feedback. I really am. So thanks, guys. The mock drafts have been doing well. Appreciate that, and I'll see you all next week.